Welcome to Icons of History, where we explore the extraordinary lives of figures who shaped our world. I'm your host, and today we embark on a fascinating journey through the life of Alberto Santos Dumont, the Brazilian aviation pioneer whose story transcends mere invention to reveal a deeply human tale of triumph and tragedy. If you're passionate about uncovering the untold stories behind history's greatest minds, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to never miss our latest explorations into the lives that changed everything. In the rolling hills of Minas Gerais, Brazil, where coffee plantations stretched endlessly toward the horizon, a child was born who would one day teach humanity to fly. Alberto Santos Dumont entered the world on July 20th, 1873, in the small town of Palmira, now known as Santos Dumont, in his honor. His birth occurred during a time when Brazil was still an empire ruled by Dom Pedro II, and the very concept of human flight remained firmly in the realm of fantasy and folklore. The Santos Dumont family represented the epitome of Brazilian prosperity during the coffee boom era. His father, Henrique Dumont, was a French engineer who had immigrated to Brazil and established himself as one of the most successful coffee plantation owners in the region. The family's wealth was substantial, built upon the labor of thousands of workers who tended to the vast coffee estates that would later fund Alberto's aeronautical dreams. His mother, Francisca de Paula Santos, came from a distinguished Brazilian family, bringing together European engineering precision with Brazilian warmth and creativity. From his earliest memories, young Alberto displayed an insatiable curiosity about mechanical devices that set him apart from his 7 siblings. While other children played with simple toys, Alberto dismantled clocks, studied the intricate movements of steam engines on the plantation, and spent countless hours observing the flight patterns of birds. His father, recognizing this unusual fascination, encouraged the boy's interests by providing him with books on engineering and mechanics, many imported from Europe at considerable expense. The coffee plantation itself became Alberto's first laboratory. The estate employed sophisticated machinery for its time, including steam-powered equipment for processing coffee beans and a narrow-gauge railway system for transporting goods. Alberto would spend hours watching the steam engines, mesmerized by the power of controlled combustion and the precision of mechanical movement. He began to understand, even as a child, that machines could amplify human capability beyond natural limitations. At age 7, Alberto experienced what he would later describe as his first true vision of flight. While watching a balloon demonstration in a nearby town, he became transfixed by the sight of humans ascending into the sky. The balloon, operated by a traveling showman, represented everything that seemed impossible, yet tantalizingly achievable. That evening, he confided to his father his burning desire to one day build machines that could carry people through the air with the grace and freedom of birds. His education began with private tutors on the plantation, where he excelled in mathematics and physics, while showing less interest in traditional subjects like literature and history. His tutors noted his exceptional ability to visualize complex mechanical problems and his persistent questioning about the principles governing motion and energy. By age 10, he was conducting his own experiments with kites and small mechanical devices, often fashioning intricate contraptions from materials found around the plantation. The turning point in Alberto's childhood came when his father suffered a serious accident while inspecting plantation machinery. The incident left Henrique partially paralyzed and forced the family to consider selling their Brazilian holdings. During his father's recovery, Alberto spent countless hours at his bedside, and it was during these intimate conversations that Henrique made a decision that would change the course of aviation history. He decided to sell the plantation and move the family to Paris, believing that Alberto's extraordinary talents required the sophisticated educational and technological environment that only Europe could provide. In 1891, at age 18, Alberto arrived in Paris with his family, carrying with him not only substantial wealth, but also an unshakable conviction that human flight was not only possible, but inevitable. The City of Light in the 1890s was experiencing unprecedented technological advancement. with electric lighting beginning to illuminate the boulevards and the recently completed Eiffel Tower standing as a testament to engineering ambition. For a young man obsessed with mechanical innovation, Paris represented the epicenter of possibility. The contrast between rural Brazil and cosmopolitan Paris was stark and initially overwhelming. Alberto struggled with the formal European educational system, finding the rigid structure at odds with his intuitive approach to learning. However, he thrived in the city's vibrant intellectual atmosphere, frequenting scientific lectures, visiting engineering workshops, and immersing himself in the latest developments in physics and mechanics. He enrolled in various technical courses, but often found himself more interested in practical experimentation than theoretical study. During these formative years in Paris, Alberto's personality began to take its distinctive shape. He was naturally shy and introspective, preferring the company of machines to large social gatherings. Yet he possessed an infectious enthusiasm for his aeronautical dreams that drew people to him. His small stature, standing barely 5 feet tall, and his youthful appearance often led others to underestimate his technical capabilities, a misconception he would repeatedly prove wrong through his innovations. The death of his father in 1892 marked the end of Alberto's childhood and the beginning of his transformation into the man who would revolutionize aviation. Inheriting substantial wealth, he now possessed both the financial resources and the emotional motivation to pursue his seemingly impossible dreams. The grief of losing his father, combined with the freedom that financial independence provided, created the perfect conditions for the emergence of one of history's most remarkable inventors. The Paris of the 1890s that welcomed young Santos Dumont was a city in the throes of technological revolution, where the impossible seemed to become possible with each passing day. The recent completion of the Eiffel Tower had demonstrated that engineering could reach unprecedented heights, while the emergence of electric lighting and the early experiments with automobiles suggested that the fundamental nature of human transportation was about to change forever. For Alberto, this environment proved to be the perfect crucible for transforming his childhood dreams into revolutionary reality. With his father's inheritance providing financial freedom, Alberto threw himself into the study of aeronautics with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He established a workshop in his Parisian apartment, filling it with the finest tools and materials money could buy. The space quickly became a maze of half-finished inventions, technical drawings, and mechanical components that reflected his restless mind's constant search for solutions to the puzzle of human flight. His neighbors often complained about the strange noises emanating from his workshop at all hours, as Alberto worked tirelessly, driven by an inner fire that seemed to burn brighter with each passing day. The young Brazilian's first serious foray into aviation came through his fascination with balloons. In 1897, at age 24, he commissioned the construction of his first balloon, which he christened Brazil in honor of his homeland. The balloon was a marvel of engineering precision, incorporating innovations that demonstrated Alberto's intuitive understanding of aerodynamics and his meticulous attention to detail. Unlike the cumbersome balloons of the era, Alberto's creation was designed for maneuverability and control, featuring a sophisticated valve system and a lightweight basket that reflected his engineering philosophy of elegant simplicity. His first ascent in the Brazil was a transformative experience that would shape the rest of his life. As he rose above the rooftops of Paris, Alberto felt a profound sense of liberation that went far beyond the physical sensation of flight. The city spread out below him like a living map, and for the first time, he truly understood the perspective that flight could offer humanity. The experience was both exhilarating and humbling, as he realized that he was participating in something that had been denied to every previous generation of human beings. However, Alberto's ambitions extended far beyond simple balloon flights. He recognized that true aviation required controlled, powered flight that could navigate against wind and weather. This realization led him to begin experimenting with dirigible balloons, aircraft that combined the lifting power of gas-filled envelopes with the propulsive force of engines. The technical challenges were enormous, requiring him to master not only aerodynamics, but also the emerging field of internal combustion engines. The development of his first dirigible, Santos Dumont No. 1, revealed both his genius and his willingness to risk everything for his vision. The aircraft was a delicate balance of competing forces, with a hydrogen-filled envelope providing lift while a small gasoline engine drove a propeller for forward motion. The engineering calculations required to achieve this balance were incredibly complex, involving considerations of weight distribution, center of gravity, and the dynamic forces created by the engine's operation. Alberto's approach to these challenges was uniquely intuitive. While other inventors relied heavily on theoretical calculations, he preferred to build, test, and modify based on actual performance. This methodology led to numerous crashes and near disasters, but it also produced innovations that more cautious engineers might never have discovered. His willingness to personally pilot every test flight, despite the obvious dangers, earned him both admiration and criticism from the Parisian scientific community. The social dynamics of Alberto's rise to prominence were as complex as his technical achievements. Parisian society in the 1890s was fascinated by technological innovation, and Alberto quickly became a celebrity figure whose exploits were followed eagerly by the press and public. His small stature, youthful appearance, and exotic Brazilian background made him an intriguing figure in the salons and cafes where Parisian intellectuals gathered to discuss the latest developments in science and technology. Yet this fame came with unexpected psychological pressures. Alberto found himself constantly scrutinized, with every success celebrated and every failure magnified by public attention. The pressure to continuously innovate and achieve new milestones began to take a toll on his naturally introspective personality. He developed a reputation for perfectionism that bordered on obsession, often rebuilding entire aircraft when minor flaws were discovered. His relationship with the established scientific community was particularly complex. Many respected engineers and physicists viewed his intuitive approach with skepticism, preferring the methodical theoretical work that characterized traditional scientific research. Alberto's success, despite his unconventional methods, challenged their assumptions about how innovation should occur, creating tensions that would persist throughout his career. The financial aspects of Alberto's work also shaped his development as a leader in aviation. Unlike many inventors who struggled with funding, his inherited wealth allowed him to pursue his vision without compromise. This freedom was both a blessing and a curse, as it enabled rapid experimentation, but also isolated him from the practical constraints that might have forced him to develop more commercially viable designs. During this formative period, Alberto also began to develop his distinctive philosophy about aviation's role in human progress. He believed passionately that flight should not be the exclusive domain of wealthy enthusiasts or military applications, but should instead become accessible to ordinary people as a means of transportation and personal liberation. This democratic vision of aviation would later influence his decision to freely share his designs rather than seeking patent protection. The technical evolution of his dirigible designs during this period reflected his growing mastery of aeronautical principles. Each successive aircraft incorporated lessons learned from previous flights, with improvements in engine efficiency, structural design, and control systems. By 1900, his Santos Dumont No. 6 had achieved a level of reliability and performance that demonstrated the practical viability of powered flight. The psychological transformation that occurred during these years was equally significant. The shy young man who had arrived from Brazil gradually developed the confidence and leadership qualities that would make him one of the most influential figures in early aviation. His success in conquering the technical challenges of flight gave him a sense of purpose and identity that had been missing during his earlier years in Paris. As the 19th century drew to a close, Alberto Santos Dumont had established himself as more than just an inventor or adventurer. He had become a symbol of human possibility, demonstrating that the ancient dream of flight could be transformed into reality through determination, innovation, and courage. The foundation had been laid for achievements that would soon capture the imagination of the entire world. The dawn of the 20th century found Alberto Santos Dumont poised on the precipice of immortality, though he could scarcely have imagined the magnitude of fame that awaited him. The year 1901 would prove to be the crucible in which his reputation was forged, transforming him from a wealthy Brazilian experimenter into an international icon whose name would become synonymous with the conquest of the skies. The stage was set for a series of events that would not only establish his place in aviation history, but also reveal the complex psychological pressures that accompanied unprecedented public acclaim. The catalyst for Alberto's meteoric rise came in the form of a challenge that captured the imagination of all Paris. Henri Deutsch de la Meurthe, a wealthy petroleum magnate and aviation enthusiast, had established a prize of 100,000 francs for the first person to fly from the Aero Club of France at St. Cloud to the Eiffel Tower and return within 30 minutes. The Deutsch Prize, as it became known, represented more than mere monetary reward. It was a test of whether controlled, powered flight could achieve practical utility in an urban environment. For Alberto, the challenge represented the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the capabilities he had been developing through years of experimentation. His Santos Dumont No. 6, the latest evolution of his dirigible designs, seemed ideally suited for the task. The aircraft featured a refined hydrogen envelope, an improved engine mounting system, and enhanced control mechanisms that reflected his accumulated expertise in aeronautical engineering. More importantly, it embodied his philosophy that aviation should serve practical purposes rather than merely providing spectacular entertainment. The first attempt at the Deutsch Prize, made on July 13, 1901, ended in near disaster when the dirigible's envelope became entangled in trees near the Eiffel Tower. The crash could have been fatal, but Alberto's quick thinking and the aircraft's relatively low speed allowed him to escape with minor injuries. The incident, however, provided a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in his pursuit and the fine line between triumph and tragedy that characterized early aviation. Rather than being discouraged by the setback, Alberto used the crash as a learning opportunity, analyzing every aspect of the flight to identify improvements for future attempts. His methodical approach to failure, treating each setback as valuable data rather than personal defeat, demonstrated the scientific mindset that distinguished him from mere daredevils. He spent weeks refining the No. 6's design, strengthening critical components, and improving the control systems based on lessons learned from the crash. The successful completion of the Deutsch Prize on October 19, 1901, marked the moment when Alberto Santos Dumont transcended the boundaries of national fame to become a global celebrity. The flight itself was a masterpiece of precision and timing, with Alberto navigating the complex air currents around the Eiffel Tower while maintaining the speed necessary to complete the circuit within the required time limit. As he rounded the tower and headed back towards St. Cloud, thousands of spectators held their breath, witnessing what many considered the first practical demonstration of controlled, powered flight. The moment of victory was electric with emotion and significance. As Alberto's dirigible touched down at St. Cloud with minutes to spare, the crowd erupted in celebration that echoed across Paris and soon reverberated around the world. The achievement represented more than a technical accomplishment. It symbolized humanity's conquest of a realm that had been forbidden since the dawn of civilization. For the first time in history, a human being had demonstrated the ability to navigate through the air with the precision and reliability necessary for practical transportation. The aftermath of the Deutsch Prize victory revealed both the intoxicating power of fame and its unexpected psychological burdens. Alberto found himself thrust into a spotlight that illuminated every aspect of his life, from his technical innovations to his personal habits and social relationships. The press coverage was unprecedented, with newspapers around the world featuring detailed accounts of his achievement and speculating about the future of aviation. His photograph appeared on the front pages of publications from New York to Tokyo, making his face recognizable to millions of people who had never seen an aircraft. The financial reward from the Deutsch Prize, while substantial, paled in comparison to the social and cultural capital that Alberto had acquired. He He became the most sought-after guest at Parisian social gatherings, with hostesses competing to secure his presence at their salons and dinner parties. The scientific community, which had previously viewed his work with skepticism, now sought his opinions on aeronautical matters and invited him to lecture at prestigious institutions. However, this sudden elevation to celebrity status brought unexpected challenges that tested Alberto's psychological resilience. The constant public attention made it difficult for him to pursue his work with the focused intensity that had characterized his earlier years. Every public appearance became a performance, with expectations that he would provide entertaining anecdotes about his flying experiences or profound insights about the future of aviation. The pressure to maintain his public image while continuing to innovate created a tension that would persist throughout the remainder of his career. The technical implications of the Deutsch Prize victory extended far beyond the immediate achievement. Alberto's demonstration that dirigible flight could be both controlled and reliable sparked a wave of international interest in aviation development. Governments began to consider the military applications of powered flight, while entrepreneurs explored the commercial possibilities of air transportation. The achievement had effectively launched the aviation age, with Alberto serving as its most visible pioneer and advocate. During this period of rising fame, Alberto also began to develop the personal relationships that would shape his later years. His circle of friends expanded to include some of the most influential figures in European society, from scientists and engineers to artists and politicians. These relationships provided intellectual stimulation and social support, but they also created new obligations and expectations that competed with his dedication to aeronautical research. The psychological impact of his achievement was profound and complex. On one hand, the successful completion of the Deutsch Prize validated years of experimentation and risk-taking, providing confirmation that his vision of practical aviation was achievable. The recognition and acclaim satisfied a deep need for acceptance and validation that had driven much of his work. Yet the sudden transformation from private experimenter to public figure also created new anxieties and pressures that he had not anticipated. As 1901 drew to a close, Alberto Santos Dumont stood at the pinnacle of early aviation achievement, his name forever linked with humanity's first steps into the aerial realm. The Deutsch Prize victory had established him as the undisputed leader of the aviation movement, but it had also set expectations for future achievements that would prove increasingly difficult to meet. The foundation had been laid for both his greatest triumphs and his most profound struggles, as the man who had conquered the skies began to grapple with the unexpected complexities of fame and the relentless pressure to continue pushing the boundaries of human possibility. The years following Alberto's triumph with the Deutsch Prize marked the zenith of his creative powers and public influence, a period when his innovations would fundamentally reshape humanity's relationship with the skies. Between 1902 and 1906, Santos Dumont evolved from a dirigible pioneer into the architect of modern aviation, achieving breakthroughs that would establish the foundation for all subsequent aircraft development. Yet this period of unprecedented success also revealed the growing psychological burden of being perpetually in the global spotlight, as the weight of expectations began to take its toll on the man who had become aviation's most celebrated figure. The transition from dirigible flight to heavier-than-air aviation represented perhaps the greatest intellectual challenge of Alberto's career. While his success with powered balloons had demonstrated the possibility of controlled flight, the physics of heavier-than-air craft required entirely different approaches to lift generation, propulsion, and control. The challenge was not merely technical, but conceptual, requiring him to abandon the familiar principles of buoyancy-based flight and embrace the more complex dynamics of aerodynamic lift. Alberto's approach to this challenge reflected his characteristic blend of intuitive understanding and methodical experimentation. Rather than beginning with theoretical calculations, he started by observing the flight characteristics of birds, spending countless hours studying how they generated lift and maintained control during flight. His notebooks from this period revealed detailed sketches of wing movements and flight patterns, accompanied by speculations about the aerodynamic principles that enabled natural flight. The development of his first heavier-than-air aircraft, the 14 bis, began in 1905 and represented a radical departure from conventional aviation thinking of the era. While other pioneers like the Wright brothers were working with relatively conventional biplane configurations, Alberto chose a canard design with the elevator mounted in front of the wings. This unconventional layout reflected his belief that aircraft should be inherently stable, capable of safe flight, even when the pilot's attention was diverted from control tasks. The 14 bis incorporated numerous innovations that demonstrated Alberto's sophisticated understanding of aeronautical engineering. The aircraft featured a modular design that allowed for rapid modification and testing of different configurations. The wing structure utilized a combination of bamboo and steel tubing that provided strength while minimizing weight, while the control system employed a revolutionary approach that integrated elevator, rudder, and aileron functions in an intuitive manner. The engine selection for the 14 bis revealed Alberto's pragmatic approach to aviation development. Rather than designing a completely new power plant, he chose to modify an existing Antoinette engine, reducing its weight while maintaining adequate power output. This decision reflected his understanding that aviation progress required the integration of existing technologies rather than the invention of entirely new systems for every component. The first public flights of the 14 bis in 1906 created a sensation that eclipsed even the Deutsche victory. On October 23, 1906, at the Bagatelle field in Paris, Alberto achieved the first officially witnessed powered flight in Europe, covering a distance of 60 meters at an altitude of several meters. The flight lasted only a few seconds, but its significance was immeasurable, as it demonstrated that heavier-than-air flight was not merely a theoretical possibility, but a practical reality. The November 12, 1906 flight of the 14 bis established Alberto as the undisputed champion of European aviation. Flying before a crowd of thousands and an international panel of judges, he covered 220 meters in 21.5 seconds, winning the Archdeacon Prize for the first flight exceeding 100 meters. The achievement was particularly significant because it occurred in full public view, with extensive photographic documentation that left no doubt about its authenticity. The technical achievement of the 14 bis flights was matched by their cultural and psychological impact. For the first time, ordinary citizens could witness powered flight with their own eyes, transforming aviation from a subject of speculation into a visible reality. The flight sparked a wave of international interest that led to the establishment of aviation clubs and competitions throughout Europe and America, effectively launching the aviation industry. Alberto's response to this unprecedented success revealed both his generosity and his growing discomfort with fame. In a decision that shocked the business community, he chose not to patent his aircraft designs, instead publishing detailed drawings and specifications that allowed other inventors to build upon his work. This decision reflected his philosophical belief that aviation should benefit all humanity rather than enriching individual inventors, but it also demonstrated a naivety about the commercial realities of technological development. The period following the 14 bis flights saw Alberto at the height of his influence and creativity. He became a regular fixture at international aviation exhibitions and competitions, where his presence guaranteed massive public attendance and media coverage. His opinions on aeronautical matters were sought by governments and manufacturers, while his endorsement could make or break emerging aviation ventures. During this peak period, Alberto also began to explore the broader implications of aviation for human society. He wrote extensively about the potential for aircraft to promote international understanding by making travel more accessible and reducing the barriers between nations. His vision of aviation as a force for peace and progress reflected the optimistic spirit of the early 20th century, when technological advancement was widely viewed as inherently beneficial for humanity. The social aspects of Alberto's fame during this period were both exhilarating and exhausting. He maintained residences in Paris and other European capitals, hosting elaborate gatherings that brought together the era's most influential figures in science, politics, and the arts. These social obligations, while personally rewarding, consumed increasing amounts of time and energy that might otherwise have been devoted to technical innovation. The psychological pressures of sustained celebrity began to manifest in subtle changes to Alberto's personality and behavior. Friends noted that he had become more reserved and introspective, occasionally displaying signs of the melancholy that would later dominate his life. The constant pressure to produce new innovations and maintain his position as aviation's leading figure created a burden that few people of his era could have understood or appreciated. The technical evolution of Alberto's aircraft during this period reflected both his growing mastery of aeronautical principles and his increasing focus on practical applications. His later designs emphasized reliability and ease of operation over pure performance, demonstrating his belief that aviation's future lay in widespread adoption rather than spectacular demonstrations. As 1906 drew to a close, Alberto Santos Dumont stood at the absolute pinnacle of aviation achievement, his name synonymous with humanity's conquest of the skies. The 14 bis flights had established him as the father of practical aviation, while his generous sharing of technical knowledge had accelerated the development of the entire industry. Yet, even at this moment of supreme triumph, the seeds of future difficulties were already beginning to germinate, as the relentless pressure of fame and the rapid pace of technological change began to take their toll on the man who had given humanity the gift of flight. The final chapter of Alberto Santos Dumont's extraordinary life reads like a tragic symphony, where the very innovations that had brought him immortal fame became sources of profound anguish and despair. As the aviation industry he had helped birth evolved beyond his wildest dreams, the gentle Brazilian pioneer found himself increasingly alienated from a world that had transformed his peaceful vision of flight into an instrument of unprecedented destruction. The man who had once soared above Paris as a symbol of human possibility would spend his final years grappling with the devastating realization that his greatest gift to humanity had become its most terrible weapon. The decline began subtly in the years following his triumph with the 14 bis, as the rapid commercialization and militarization of aviation diverged sharply from Alberto's idealistic vision. While he had imagined aircraft serving as peaceful ambassadors that would unite nations and democratize travel, governments and military leaders quickly recognized the strategic potential of powered flight. The development of military aviation accelerated dramatically in the years leading up to World War I, with aircraft evolving from fragile experimental machines into sophisticated weapons platforms capable of reconnaissance, bombing, and aerial combat. Alberto's response to this militarization revealed the depth of his humanitarian convictions and the beginning of his psychological torment. He had always believed that scientific progress should serve to elevate human civilization, bringing people together rather than providing new methods of destruction. The sight of aircraft being adapted for military purposes filled him with a profound sense of betrayal and responsibility that would haunt him for the remainder of his life. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 marked the beginning of Alberto's most difficult period, as he witnessed his beloved flying machines being used to rain death from the skies. The war saw unprecedented aerial combat, with pilots engaging in deadly duels thousands of feet above the battlefields, while bombers targeted civilian populations with increasing frequency and effectiveness. Each report of aerial warfare felt like a personal wound to Alberto, who had never imagined that his innovations would contribute to such widespread suffering. The psychological impact of the war was compounded by Alberto's deteriorating physical health and his growing isolation from the aviation community he had helped create. Younger inventors and engineers had surpassed his technical achievements, developing aircraft that were faster, more reliable, and more capable than anything he had conceived. While he was universally respected as a pioneer, his influence on current developments had diminished significantly, leaving him feeling obsolete and forgotten. During the war years, Alberto retreated increasingly into solitude, spending long periods at his estate in Brazil, where he attempted to find peace away from the European conflict. However, even in his homeland, he could not escape the reality of what aviation had become. Brazilian newspapers carried detailed accounts of aerial battles and bombing raids, while the country's own military began developing aviation capabilities based on the principles he had established. The post-war period brought little relief from Alberto's anguish, as the 1920s saw the continued expansion of military aviation and the emergence of new applications that further troubled his conscience. The development of larger, more powerful aircraft capable of carrying massive bomb loads represented everything he had hoped aviation would never become. The Spanish Civil War of the 1930s, with its systematic bombing of civilian targets, provided a horrifying preview of the aerial warfare that would characterize World War II. Alberto's personal struggles during this period were exacerbated by his increasing battle with depression, a condition that was poorly understood and inadequately treated in his era. Friends and family members noted his growing withdrawal from social activities and his obsessive focus on the negative applications of aviation technology. The man who had once been the life of Parisian salons became a reclusive figure, haunted by guilt over his role in creating the means for aerial destruction. The final tragedy of Alberto's life unfolded against the backdrop of Brazil's own political turmoil in the 1930s. The country was experiencing significant social and political upheaval, with various factions competing for control of the government. When aircraft were used to suppress civilian demonstrations in São Paulo in 1932, Alberto witnessed firsthand how his innovations had become tools of oppression, even in his beloved homeland. On July 23, 1932, at the age of 59, Alberto Santos Dumont took his own life at the Hotel La Plage in Guarujá, Brazil. The official cause of death was listed as suicide by hanging, though the exact circumstances remained shrouded in mystery and speculation. His final act seemed to represent the ultimate expression of his despair over what aviation had become, a tragic end for the man who had once embodied humanity's highest aspirations. The immediate aftermath of Alberto's death sparked a period of reflection on his contributions and the complex legacy he had left behind. While the aviation industry mourned the loss of its founding father, many also recognized the profound moral questions his life had raised about the responsibility of inventors for the applications of their creations. His death served as a stark reminder that technological progress, no matter how beneficial its original intentions, could have unintended and devastating consequences. The legacy of Alberto Santos Dumont extends far beyond his technical contributions to aviation, encompassing fundamental questions about innovation, responsibility, and the relationship between scientific progress and human welfare. His life story serves as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale, demonstrating the potential for individual genius to transform the world, while also illustrating the psychological burden that such transformation can impose on its creators. In the decades following his death, Alberto's reputation has undergone numerous reinterpretations, as historians and biographers have sought to understand the complex relationship between his achievements and his ultimate despair. Some have portrayed him as a tragic figure whose idealism was crushed by the harsh realities of human nature, while others have emphasized his role as a visionary whose contributions to human progress far outweigh the negative applications of his innovations. The modern aviation industry, which now carries billions of passengers safely around the world each year, stands as perhaps the greatest vindication of Alberto's original vision. While military applications of aviation continue to exist, the overwhelming majority of flights serve peaceful purposes, connecting cultures, facilitating commerce, and enabling personal experiences that would have been impossible without his pioneering work. Today, as we stand on the threshold of new technological revolutions in transportation and communication, the story of Alberto Santos Dumont remains profoundly relevant. His life reminds us that innovation carries both tremendous potential and significant responsibility, and that the creators of transformative technologies must grapple with the full implications of their work. What do you think about Santos Dumont's tragic struggle with the militarization of his peaceful invention? How do you believe modern innovators should handle the responsibility that comes with creating world-changing technologies? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on this complex legacy. If you found this exploration of Santos Dumont's remarkable yet tragic life compelling, please give this video a like and subscribe to Icons of History for more deep dives into the extraordinary lives that shaped our world. Hit the notification bell to never miss our latest episodes, where we continue to uncover the human stories behind history's greatest achievements and most profound tragedies. Next week, we'll be exploring the life of another visionary whose innovations changed the world,